Wyoming Territory, August 1879. The sun had just dipped low behind the Bighorn Mountains when Naomi Bellerose lost her way. Her horse, spooked by a rattler, had bolted down a rocky ravine, leaving her with nothing but the pack on her back and a pistol she barely knew how to use. She had followed the winding creek, thinking it might lead her back toward the stage route. Instead, it led her straight into trouble. She stepped out of the cottonwoods and right into an outlaw camp. There were 6 of them, gathered around a fire, their laughter loud, their rifles close. A gutted deer hung from a tree branch, blood still dripping into the dirt. Naomi froze, heart thudding. She took one step back and snapped a twig. Heads turned. Well, well, one of the men said, standing slowly. He was tall and slack-jawed, with a scar down his neck. Look what wandered in. Naomi's boots crunched as she backed up, hand going to her pistol. Easy now, another said, a wiry man with a missing front tooth. No need for that. We ain't gonna hurt you. Unless you run. She turned to bolt. That was her mistake. 2 of them grabbed her before she made it to the trees. They dragged her back to the fire, ignoring her kicking. One tried to grab her wrists, but she twisted hard and bit his hand. He yelled and slapped her across the face, hard enough to send her to the ground. Feisty, the scarred one said, laughing. I like her. She was on her knees, dirt in her mouth, blood on her lip, when a rifle cracked from the trees. The man with the missing tooth dropped first, a hole between his eyes, crumpling without a sound. The camp exploded into chaos. Shots rang out, men dove for cover. Naomi crawled behind the log, her ears ringing. From the shadows came a figure tall, lean, fast-moving without sound. Another man dropped. Then another. The last 2 ran. Naomi could not breathe. The man stepped into the firelight, rifle still raised. He was Cheyenne, his long black hair tied back, his dark eyes scanning the camp. When he saw her, he lowered his weapon. You are alone? He asked. She nodded, still shaking. He stepped closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded animal. You are hurt. She did not answer, just stared at him. Blood trickled down her chin, her cheek already swelling. What were you doing here? He asked. I got lost, she whispered. I was trying to find the stage road. You picked the wrong trail, he said quietly. He turned his head, listening. Nothing moved. Come. It is not safe to stay. He reached for her hand. She hesitated just a moment, then let him help her to her feet. They moved quickly, his steps silent, hers clumsy. After a while, he stopped beside a fallen tree and knelt, pulling a water skin from his belt. Drink. Naomi drank, her hands trembling. Who are you? He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Fenn Clearwater. She blinked. You saved my life. He did not answer that. Instead, he stood. You cannot go back that way. Come with me. Where? Safe place. She followed him, mostly because she had no other choice. Her legs ached, her face throbbed. But Fenn moved like he knew the land with his eyes closed. They walked for miles, the stars wheeling above them, until they reached a narrow canyon with a small fire already lit and a lean-to of branches and hides. It looked like it had been waiting for them. He motioned for her to sit. You will rest. I will watch. You live out here? She asked. He nodded once. Do you always shoot men without warning? He looked at her calm. They were going to hurt you. She swallowed hard. Thank you for stopping them. He sat across from her, his rifle resting on his knees. You should sleep. I cannot. He reached into his pouch and handed her a strip of dried meat. Eat. Then close your eyes. I will not let anyone near. Something in the way he said it made her believe him. She lay down, using her rolled-up coat as a pillow. The fire cracked softly. She watched him through the flames, his stillness, his quiet strength. You did not ask my name, she said. He looked up. You will tell me when you want. She hesitated, then said, Naomi. Naomi Bellerose. He nodded. Sleep, Naomi Bellerose. She did. When she woke, the sun was up, and Fenn was gone. Panic hit her hard. She sat up fast, heart racing, but then she heard movement behind the rocks. He returned a moment later holding 2 rabbits by the legs. You left, she said. I was close. She watched as he cleaned and cooked the rabbits. The silence between them felt full, not empty. As they ate, she asked, Why did you help me? He did not answer right away. Then, quietly, Because I was there. That is not an answer. He looked at her straight on. I do not like men who take what is not theirs. I saw what they meant to do. She stared at him. And you risked your life. I have risked more for less. They ate in silence. Afterward, he said, Where were you headed? Laramie. I was going to live with my cousin. He offered me work at the mercantile. He nodded. You are far off course. I know, she said bitterly. My horse ran. I followed the creek, like a fool. Not a fool, he said. Just unlucky. She looked at him. And you? Why are you out here alone? He looked away. I was with the dog soldiers. Most are gone now. I do not belong anywhere anymore. She felt something shift inside her, something soft and aching. You belong somewhere? His eyes met hers. Do I? She opened her mouth, then closed it. They spent that day walking. He taught her how to read the sun and the land. He showed her where to find water, how to move quiet on uneven ground. Each time she stumbled, he reached for her without hesitation. That night, they camped near the river. She sat beside him as he cleaned his rifle, the firelight dancing on his skin. You are not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I do not know. But not this. He looked at her. And what are you? She hesitated. A girl who has lost too much. He nodded, as if he understood that better than most. Their eyes locked. The space between them felt charged, but neither moved. Not yet. But something had started. Something real. The third morning brought low clouds and the scent of wet earth. Fenn paused at the edge of a ravine, his eyes on the gray stretch of sky. Naomi stood behind him, arms crossed against the chill, her skirt damp from the waist down after wading through the shallow creek below. How far to the next settlement? She asked, voice still rough from sleep. You will not reach Laramie by west, he said without turning. Not unless you want trouble again. I don't. He crouched, pressing fingers to the soil. We follow the river north. There is a small place near the foothills. Scattered cabins. Friendly enough. She shifted her weight. They won't ask questions? They will. But I will answer. Naomi studied him. Why would they listen to you? He straightened, brushing earth from his hands. Because I've helped them through 2 winters. And I don't ask for anything back. They walked in silence for some time after that, the land opening wide around them. Grass grew tall and golden, and the wind moved through it like breath through cloth. Naomi kept pace behind him, watching how he moved, never rushing, never wasting a step. His quiet was not the kind born of caution, but of ease. Like the land had made space for him long ago, and he'd simply accepted. After midday, they stopped to rest beneath an outcrop of sandstone, the stone warm against their backs. Naomi leaned her head back, eyes closed against the wind. You always travel alone? She asked. I did not used to. She glanced over. Family? His jaw worked once before he answered. A younger brother. He followed me into war. He didn't follow me out. She looked down. I'm sorry. He shook his head. He made his choice. They sat a while without speaking. A hawk circled high above, its cry sharp and lonely. I had a sister, Naomi said. She died in childbirth. The baby too. I was 16. After that, it was just me and my mother. She lived in Louisiana, you said? Not anymore. Fever took her last year. That's why I headed west. Fenn looked at her, steady and unhurried. You carry them with you still? Yes, she said. I do. He handed her a strip of dried berries from his pouch. They chewed in silence, the wind tugging at their clothes. By nightfall, the land had changed again rockier, with pine and spruce clinging to the slopes. They found shelter beneath a ledge of stone, dry and shielded from the breeze. Fenn gathered wood and flint, while Naomi knelt to arrange their bedding. Her fingers ached, but she didn't complain. She didn't want to. When the fire caught, she sat close to it, holding out her hands. The flames lit her face in flickers. Fenn brought over 2 tin cups filled with river water and handed her one. She drank, then studied the cup in her hands. You ever think about leaving all this behind? She asked. The wild, the quiet, the danger? I did once. What changed? He stirred the embers with a stick. I saw what came after. Towns crowding out the trees. Rail lines cutting through old trails. Men who think nothing of taking what isn't theirs. I'd rather sleep near wolves than men like that. Naomi watched as the firelight caught the edge of his cheekbone. You don't seem afraid of much. I've had reason not to be. She tilted her head. What would make you afraid now? He glanced at her. Losing something worth keeping. She didn't look away. You think you found that? His eyes stayed on hers. I don't know yet. The fire crackled between them, and the air felt heavier somehow. Naomi tucked her knees under her skirt. Do you ever miss speaking your own language? Fenn looked up. I still speak it. Alone, mostly. Could you teach me? She asked, catching herself as soon as the words slipped free. Or is that? He interrupted, gentle. If you want to learn, I will teach you. She smiled, small and tired. Then teach me something. He thought a moment, then said, Vamotodahi. She tried to repeat it, mouth stumbling over the sounds. It means you are not alone. Naomi's voice caught. Say it again. He did, slower this time. She whispered it back, still clumsy, but closer. They lay down when the fire grew low, their backs to the stone wall, the night thick with pine scent and far-off coyote cries. Naomi didn't speak again, but as sleep came, she felt the shape of the words Fenn had given her settle somewhere deep inside. Not just the meaning, but the weight of it. For the first time in a long while, she believed it. The cabin sat low in the trees, built from rough-cut pine, its roof patched with bark and old canvas. Smoke curled thin from the chimney. Fenn stopped a good 20 paces out, and raised his hand. Naomi stood beside him, her skirts dusted with pine needles, boots caked in creek mud. She watched the doorway, heart uneven in her chest. A man stepped out holding a hat in one hand, the other resting on the butt of a shotgun. His eyes flicked from Fenn to Naomi, then back again. You bringin' trouble with you? Fenn kept his voice steady. No trouble. Just a woman needing a place to rest a few days. The man squinted. She sick? No, mean? Naomi answered before Fenn could. Only when I'm cornered. The man's mouth twitched. Fair enough. He waved them in. Inside, the air smelled of salt pork and moss. A kettle hung over coals, and a girl of maybe 12 sat sewing strips of cloth together in her lap. She barely looked up. You can stay in the lean-to out back, the man said. Ain't much, but it's dry. Name's Merton. That's my niece, Sadie. Fenn nodded. We won't stay long. I didn't ask how long. You're good to me, I'm good to you. Addie finally looked at Naomi, her eyes sharp behind a fall of hair. You got a rifle? No, you should get one. Naomi gave a tired smile. I'll keep that in mind. They took the lean-to as offered. The roof sagged in one corner, and the dirt floor was uneven, but it held heat when the fire pit was lit and gave them walls between themselves and the open dark. Fenn laid out his bedroll on one side and gestured for Naomi to take the other. Neither spoke for a while. That evening, Merton brought over a hunk of bread and a strip of salt pork, wrapped in burlap. "It's what we got," he said. "Ain't fancy." Naomi took it with both hands. "Thank you. You planning on marrying that fella?" he asked, jerking his chin toward the lean-to. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Merton waited, then shrugged. "You will. Or you won't. Either way, he's the kind that don't leave a thing half done. That's all I'll say." She brought the food back to the fire. Fenn didn't ask what Merton had said, and she didn't offer. Later, when the wind picked up and the trees groaned low against one another, Naomi turned toward him across the fire pit. "I used to believe people were mostly good." Fenn's eyes were on the coals. "What changed that?" "Too many times being proved wrong." He didn't answer right away. "It's not wrong to hope." "I didn't say it was. I said I stopped." "You still carry it, though. That hope." She met his gaze. "And you? What do you carry?" He looked at her then, long and quiet. "Names. Places. Things I didn't say when I should have." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Does it get lighter?" "No," he said. "But you get stronger." The fire popped, and a moth drifted close to the flame before veering off. Naomi watched it disappear into the dark. "You said you used to fight?" she said. "Do you miss it?" "I miss the men I fought beside. Not the fighting." "Do you ever think about going back? To your people?" "They're scattered. The old ways are fading." "And the new ways?" He reached for a twig and tossed it into the fire. "I haven't decided if they're worth living for yet." She didn't press him. That night, she lay awake long after the fire died down, listening to his breathing. It was steady, like the river they'd followed, like something that would always be there if she reached for it. In the morning, she found Addie outside skinning a rabbit with practiced hands. "You always do this on your own?" Naomi asked. "Uncle Merton's got the back leg still healing." "So, yeah?" Naomi crouched beside her. "I want to learn." Addie shrugged. "All right. Don't cut along the belly. You'll spoil the meat." By midday, Naomi's hands were stiff and blood-streaked, but the rabbit was clean and ready for cooking. Fenn leaned against the fence, watching her with a look she hadn't seen before, something between quiet pride and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. That evening, they sat behind the lean-to where the trees gave way to meadow. The sun settled low, casting gold across the tall grass. "I think I could stay here," Naomi said. "Not forever. But for now." Fenn didn't look at her. "You don't have to decide tonight." "I'm not. I'm just saying I could." He turned his head then. "Not because it's safe." "No," she said. "Because you're here." His chest rose once, slow. "I won't ask you for anything." "I know. But if you stay," he said, "I'll build something better than that lean-to." She smiled. "Then I'll help you build it." And he nodded just once. Not as promise, but as answer. The first frost came quietly overnight. Naomi woke, breath misting in the early light, and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The lean-to's roof creaked softly above her, and across the fire pit, Fenn was already up, binding a narrow stack of pine branches with a strip of rawhide. She stepped outside, boots crunching over frozen needles. The trees shimmered faintly, their edges catching pale gold from the rising sun. Her fingers ached from the cold, but she didn't complain. "Winter comes early up here," he said, not looking up from his work. "I noticed. We'll need more wood. More than Merton's stores can manage." Naomi rubbed her arms. "How far would we have to go?" "There's a stand of deadfall near the ridge. Dry enough to burn clean. We'll take the mule." She watched him cinch the bundle tighter. His movements were efficient, steady. She didn't ask why he'd already gathered rope or where he kept the mule or how he always seemed to know what they need before they did. That part of him had become familiar. They left just after breakfast, following a trail that wound up through the thinning trees. The mule was small and sharp-eyed, its ears twitching with each rustle. Naomi walked beside it, one hand on the halter, her other clutching a wool scarf Merton's niece had offered without a word. Fenn led them in silence. The path narrowed in places, forcing them to walk single file. Naomi kept her eyes on the ground, careful not to slip on the frozen moss. Around them, the forest was still, save for the occasional flutter of wings or a pine cone thudding to the earth. When they reached the ridge, she paused to catch her breath. "Are you always this quiet on the trail?" she asked. He stepped to her side, scanning the tree-line. "I listen more than I speak. Is that how you survived so long out here?" His eyes didn't leave the horizon. "That, and knowing when to leave something behind." She rested her hand on the mule's neck. "Have you ever left someone behind who didn't deserve it?" He turned toward her, slow. "Yes." She didn't ask who. The answer sat between them like a stone. They cut timber in rhythm, he splitting, she stacking. By midday, the pile had grown waist-high. Naomi's arms burned, but she didn't stop until Fenn lowered his axe and said, "That's enough for now." They sat on a fallen log, the sun weak above them. She passed him a piece of rye bread wrapped in cloth. He took it, nodding once. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. He chewed slowly before answering. "Sometimes. And I don't know what a future looks like." She folded the cloth in her lap. "I'm starting to see one." His gaze held hers. "With me? I wouldn't be here otherwise." The wind stirred, cold and dry. He took her hand, the gesture quiet and certain. His thumb traced the line of her knuckles, work-worn, raw at the edges. "I don't want to be a pause in your life, Naomi," he said. "You're not." He looked down at their hands. "I've spent years living between places. Never staying long enough to be part of anything. Then stay long enough now," she said. They didn't speak after that, not until the mule was packed and the shadows stretched long across the snow-dusted trail. As they made their way down the ridge, Naomi walked beside him, her hand brushing his arm now and then, without needing to hold on. Back at the cabin, Addie was waiting at the fence, cheeks red from the cold. "You were gone longer than you said." Naomi handed her a bundle of firewood. "We brought enough to last." Addie glanced at Fenn, then back at Naomi. "You'll need more before winter's done." "Then we'll get more," Naomi said. That night, after the fire settled low and Merton had gone quiet in the cabin, Naomi stepped outside. Fenn stood at the edge of the trees, eyes fixed on the stars. "They're clearer up here," she said. He looked over his shoulder. "You can see farther when there's nothing in your way." She walked to his side. "I haven't had anyone to look toward anything with. Not in a long time." He reached for her hand again, and this time, she didn't hesitate. "Then let's look together," he said. And she knew, without needing proof or promise, that he meant it. Every word. It was late November before Fenn finished the cabin. The lean-to had served well enough through the first hard weeks, but Naomi had insisted more with her presence than her words that a life worth staying for needed walls that didn't lean and a door that latched. So he built it, square and solid, with a roof that sloped to shed snow and a hearth deep enough to hold heat through the coldest nights. She helped where she could, chopping kindling, smoothing clay between chinks, stitching curtains from old flour sacks Addie had offered without fanfare. Fenn never commented on the uneven seams or the way her hands blistered early and often. He just kept working beside her until the place began to feel like something real. The first night they slept under that roof, the wind howled so loud it might have pulled the world apart, but inside, the fire held and the logs didn't groan. Naomi lay beside him on the pine bough mattress, wrapped beneath a thick wool quilt Merton's sister had traded for salt and jerky. "I never thought I'd sleep under a roof someone built for me," she said, her voice low. "I didn't build it for you," he said. "I built it for us." She turned toward him, her hand finding his beneath the blanket. "Do you believe in second lives?" He watched the fire dance against the new stonework. "I believe in what's left after the first one falls apart." The next day, they rode to the trading post 2 valleys east. Fenn needed nails, and Naomi wanted to see if the shopkeeper still had a cast iron kettle she'd eyed once on their way through weeks ago. They arrived just after noon, the sun pale over the ridgeline. The trader, a Frenchman named Jules, greeted them with a nod and a drink of hot chicory from a battered tin pot. "You come for that pot, I reckon," he said, eyeing Naomi. She raised her brows. "It's still here. Folks don't cook slow out here. They want fast. Beans and bullets." Fenn handed over a bundle of dried meat and a length of deer hide. "We'll take it." Jules wrapped the kettle in burlap and passed it to Naomi. "You settle in these hills now?" She met Fenn's gaze. "I think so." Jules nodded, as if he'd seen too much of people coming and going to be surprised by either. "You'll need more than a kettle come February. Cold cut the legs out from under a mule." "We'll be ready," Fenn said. On their way back, they stopped by the river. The ice had begun to form in thin, delicate sheets along the banks. Naomi stood at the edge, watching the water run beneath the frozen skin. "I don't know what I expected when I left Louisiana," she said. "But it wasn't this. You regret it?" "No," she said. "Not one part of it. Not even the worst days. Because they led here." He took her hand, pressing it between his palms. "You've changed since I found you." "So have you." He nodded. "I stopped waiting to lose the things I care about." They walked the rest of the way in silence, the sound of hooves crunching through frost the only noise between them. Back at the cabin, Naomi set the kettle on the hearth and filled it with water from the barrel. She added dried sage and a pinch of sweetgrass Fenn had gathered weeks before. As the scent rose, warming the room, he came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You're not afraid anymore," he said. "I still get afraid," she said. "But it doesn't stop me." He rested his chin against her temple. "Will you marry me?" She turned in his arms, her face calm, certain. "Yes." They married the next week. Merton stood as witness, and Addie brought a ribbon Naomi wove into her braid. There was no preacher, just the two of them speaking quiet vows beneath the trees while snowflakes drifted through the branches. Fenn placed a ring carved from bone on her finger, and she gave him a small wooden token she'd whittled with his knife, a bird in flight. After, they shared bread and cider with the small handful of neighbors who'd come, and when the guests left, Naomi stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching the snow fall thick and quiet. Inside, Fenn stoked the fire. She turned to him, her eyes bright. "This is ours now," she said. He walked to her, brushing snow from her shoulders. "It always was. We just had to find it." She leaned into him, her voice a whisper. "We'll grow old here." He kissed her then, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that carried every word they hadn't needed to speak. Years passed. They planted a small garden come spring, and Naomi learned to tan hides without tearing the edges. Fenn built a smokehouse and taught her how to read tracks in snow. Each winter felt shorter than the last, not because of the weather, but because they faced it together. Addie came by often, usually with questions or a new skill to show off. She grew taller, leaner, and when she left for school in Cheyenne, Naomi packed her food and stitched her initials into a handkerchief. One summer, Fenn carved a cradle from pine and painted it with ochre and soot. Naomi filled it with quilts and sang old lullabies into the quiet before sleep. Their daughter was born in late August, her cry sharp and strong, her fists curling around Fenn's finger before she'd drawn her first full breath. They named her Clara, after Naomi's sister. Fenn carried her to the ridge one morning, just as the sun crested the trees, and whispered words in Cheyenne to the wind, his daughter swaddled against his chest. Naomi watched from the cabin doorway, one hand resting on the doorframe, the other pressed against her heart. She did not cry. She did not need to. They lived quietly, without hurry or fanfare. And in the years that followed, through each season's turning, Naomi and Fenn built a life that held. A life that stayed.